If hate had a sound, it would probably be the way his voice cracked through the office every damn morning. And if love had a facet, would be the same one glaring at me from across the table, lips pressed tight, eyes burning with all the things he'd never admit. I never thought the word objection could make my heart skip a beat. But that's what happens when your worst enemy looks like he just stepped out of a courtroom fantasy and walks around acting like he owns the place. His name was Ethan Pricey, 32, senior associate, Harvard Law, the golden boy of Henderson and Vale LLP. Mine? Noah Carter, 27, newly promoted junior partner, the guy who didn't come from old money or Ivy League halls, just stubbornness and late nights. And for some reason, Ethan hated that. Every case meeting turned into a battlefield. Every shared client a duel. It was almost addictive the way our arguments would spark, crackle, and leave the room silent except for our breathing. Everyone in the firm joked that one day, one of us would either kill the other or, well, something worse. They were closer to the truth than they realized. The morning it all started was nothing special. New York sky half gray. The sound of traffic below like restless murmurs. I was in the middle of reviewing deposition notes when Ethan stormed into my office without knocking, holding a file like it had personally offended him. "You altered the witness list," he said, voice low but sharp. "I updated it," I replied without looking up. "Because you forgot one. Don't talk like you know better than me, Carter. Then stop giving me reasons to." The air between us was thick enough to slice. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne clean, sharp cedar and something darker underneath. For a moment, the argument teetered on the edge of something else, something that scared me more than his temper ever could. Then he turned, slammed the file down, and left. Just like that, the moment was gone. But it stayed with me anyway, like the taste of static in the air before a storm. The thing about Ethan Price was that he didn't just occupy space, he owned it. Everywhere he went, people adjusted, fell silent, straightened their ties. He didn't smile much, didn't need to, but on rare occasions when he did, usually while destroying someone in a cross-examination, it was devastating. And I hated that I noticed. Maybe that's what annoyed me the most, because no matter how much I despised his arrogance, there was a part of me that wanted to know what he looked like when he wasn't fighting, when his walls were down. That curiosity would be my undoing. A week later, we got assigned the Foster versus Milentech case, a massive corporate fraud lawsuit that could make or break both our careers. And because life has a twisted sense of humor, the partners decided we should co-lead. Ethan didn't say anything when the decision was announced, just gave me a look that said, "Try not to mess this up." I smiled sweetly back, thinking, watch me. For the next 2 months, we lived in a cycle of caffeine, sleepless nights, and perfectly worded insults. You can't cite that precedent, it's from a different jurisdiction. You can't keep pretending you're the only one who graduated with honors. Maybe because I actually earned mine. Some nights, we'd still be in the office at 1 a.m., the city outside asleep while our lights burned on. Somewhere between the late-night takeout and whispered strategy debates, our voices stopped sounding like enemies. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch him looking at me like he was searching for something he'd lost. The breaking point came on a Thursday. We'd just finished a brutal prep session with the partners when he followed me into the file room, door slamming shut behind us. I turned, startled. "What the hell, Ethan? You changed the argument structure again," he said, his tone unreadable. "Because your version would have sunk our defense," I snapped. "You're not the only one who knows how to write a motion." He stepped closer. "You think this is about the damn motion?" The room felt smaller, airless. His voice was trembling now, not with anger but something else. "You drive me insane," he said quietly. "Every time you open your mouth, every time you walk into a room, I can't think straight." I froze. My heartbeat was so loud it drowned everything else. "Then stop thinking about me." "I tried," he whispered, eyes locking on mine. "It doesn't work." And before I could say another word, kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was messy, desperate, like two people who'd been holding back too long. His hand was in my hair, mine on his chest, both of us caught between shock and hunger. I could feel every sharp breath, Every unspoken word, every line we were crossing. When he finally pulled away, I was shaking. "We can't," I said hoarsely. "I know." But neither of us moved. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Because for once, there were no words left to hide behind. Just truth and the terrifying freedom that came with it. That night I couldn't sleep. His taste was still on my lips, his voice echoing in my head. I told myself it was a mistake, that it would ruin everything we'd worked for. But when I saw him the next morning, leaning casually against the elevator wall, eyes finding mine with a flicker of something warm, I knew I was already in too deep. We didn't talk about it. Not at first. But the air between us had changed. Every glance felt charged, every touch accidental but deliberate. We worked side by side like always, but now, every time our hands brushed, it felt like a secret only we knew. And of course, secrets never stay secret for long. It started with whispers. A paralegal who saw us leaving late. Partner who noticed the tension. In a firm like ours, gossip spread faster than evidence in a courtroom. Suddenly, every meeting felt like a trial where we were both the accused. One night, as we packed up, Ethan said quietly, "They're talking." I didn't look up. "Let them." His laugh was bitter. "You think it's that easy?" "No," I said, "but I'm not ashamed of wanting something real." He went silent for a long time. Then he said softly, "Neither am I." By Monday, the air in the office felt different. Colder. Sharper. Like everyone knew something I didn't. When I walked past the glass conference room, conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes flicked up, then away. I caught the faintest whisper, "That's him." I didn't need to ask who him was. I already knew. Later that morning, Ethan walked into my office, jaw tight, tie slightly loosened, something he never did. He shut the door quietly, then leaned against it like he needed it to hold him up. "They know," he said. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "How bad?" "Someone saw us leave the gala together last night. Henderson got an anonymous email this morning. He called me into his office." My stomach dropped. "And?" Ethan gave a dry laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. He said the firm has a reputation to maintain, that personal relationships between senior and junior partners are unprofessional. Unprofessional, I repeated, heat rising in my voice. "But half this place is sleeping with each other." "Yeah," Ethan said, rubbing his temples. "Just not with another man." There it was, the unspoken rule. The invisible wall we just crashed through. I took a step toward him. "What are you going to do?" He looked at me for a long time. Too long. Then said, quietly, "They want me to transfer to the DC office." I froze. "That's effective next month," he interrupted, his voice shaking just slightly. "They're calling it a promotion." I laughed bitterly. "A promotion that happens to get you 200 miles away from me." Ethan didn't answer. His silence said everything. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, deadlines, and pretending nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. We stopped talking in hallways, stopped staying late together. Every email we sent read like strangers discussing a case. Every look across the office, a silent apology neither of us could voice. At night, I'd find myself replaying that kiss, the warmth, the shock, the way he'd said I tried. And I hated that even now, when everything was falling apart, I still wanted him. One evening, I found him alone in the file room again, the same place where everything began. He didn't hear me come in. He was standing by the window, tie undone, staring out at the city like he was trying to memorize it. "Do you ever get tired of running?" I asked softly. He turned. "Noah." I closed the door behind me. "Because that's what this is, right? You running from what people think, from what you feel." "Don't," he said sharply. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You care more about their approval than your own damn happiness." His eyes flashed. "You think this is about approval? This is about survival, about reputation. You think the firm will keep me if they see me as a liability?" "So what?" I shot back. You'll go live in DC and pretend none of this happened? Pretend we never. He closed the distance between us in 2 steps, grabbing my wrist. Don't make this harder than it already is. I stared at him, the same man who'd once kissed me like he couldn't breathe without me, now begging me to let go. I can't keep pretending, I whispered. His grip loosened. Then maybe I'm the only one who can. That broke something in me I didn't know could still break. The day he left was colder than it should have been. Everyone gathered in the lobby to send him off, polite smiles, handshakes, the usual meaningless words. I stayed in my office, staring at the half-empty coffee mug he'd left behind. When the elevator doors closed around him, it felt like the end of something I hadn't even gotten to name. That night, I walked home in the rain. The city lights blurred like watercolor through the downpour. I didn't cry. I just couldn't. Because how do you mourn something you never had the right to claim? Months passed. Work went on. Cases came and went. I told myself I'd moved on, that maybe we were just a moment out of time, something that wasn't meant to survive the daylight. But sometimes, when I stayed late, I'd still catch myself glancing at the file room door, half expecting him to be there, half praying he wasn't. Then one day I got a call. Mr. Carter? This is Valerie from Henderson and Vale DC branch. We're requesting assistance on the Militech appeal. Mr. Price personally asked for you to consult. My heart stopped. What? Yes, she said cheerfully. He said you're the best man for the job. I almost laughed. The irony wasn't lost on me. A week later, I was on a train to DC, file folders packed neatly beside me, pretending my pulse wasn't doing cartwheels. When I arrived at the DC office, everything felt unnervingly sterile: white walls, silent corridors, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Then I saw him, standing by the window of his new office, looking every bit the golden boy again, but there was something different in his eyes. A weariness, a quiet regret. Noah, he said softly when he saw me. You came. You asked, I replied. He smiled faintly. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I. We stood there for a moment, saying nothing. The silence was heavy, but not angry anymore, just full of everything that had been left unsaid. Working together again was torture. Not the fiery, thrilling kind from before, but the slow, aching kind that gnaws at you from the inside. Every glance, every near touch, every breath felt like reopening an old wound. But this time, there was something new behind Ethan's restraint: guilt. I saw it in the way he'd stop mid-sentence, like the words hurt to say, in the way his hand would hover near mine, then pull back as if burned. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. Why did you call me here? I asked, slamming a file on his desk. If you're going to act like I'm just another associate, because I couldn't do this case without you, he cut in. Don't lie. I'm not, he said quietly. You're the only person who ever challenged me. The only one who saw past the perfect mask everyone else believes in. He paused, eyes locking on mine. I needed to see you again, Noah, even if it kills me. My heart stumbled. You don't get to say that after what you did. He looked away. I know. The night we won the appeal, the partners took everyone out for drinks. I left early. I couldn't stand the laughter, the champagne, the false celebration. When I reached the parking lot, I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan's voice. Wait. I turned, drenched in the orange glow of the streetlight. What do you want, Ethan? He hesitated, then said, to stop being afraid. Before I could respond, he stepped closer, and suddenly, it was just us again. The world faded, and for one wild heartbeat, I didn't care about rules or firms or the people watching from their ivory towers. He reached out, brushing his fingers against mine. I miss you, he said softly, every day. But I didn't call you here to start something again. I called you because I can't end it properly until I tell you the truth. I swallowed hard. What truth? That I love you, he said simply. And I should have chosen you back then. The words hit like a blow. I didn't know whether to cry or scream or laugh, so I did none of it. I just stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't desperate this time. It was slow, aching, full of everything we'd both been too afraid to say. When we finally broke apart, I whispered, "So what now?" He smiled small, real, a little broken. "Now I stop running." That night, Ethan resigned. The next morning, his letter was the talk of the firm, how the star associate had walked away from a six-figure salary, a near-guaranteed partnership. When he came to say goodbye, he looked lighter, freer, like a man who'd finally stopped pretending. "Where will you go?" I asked. "California, maybe," he said. "Start something new, something that feels honest." I nodded. "And me?" He smiled. "You'll do what you always do, fight, win, live." He turned to leave, then stopped, glancing back. "You could always join me." I laughed softly. "Is that an invitation?" "It's a promise," he said. "If you ever get tired of surviving, come find me." And then he was gone. Months later, I did. I found him in a small coastal town, running a tiny legal aid office for people who couldn't afford representation. He looked different, sunburned, relaxed, sleeves rolled up, laughter in his eyes. When he saw me, he froze for a moment, then grinned. "Took you long enough." I shrugged, smiling. "Had to finish a few cases." He walked toward me slowly, the ocean wind whipping through his hair. And when he stopped in front of me, he said the words I'd waited too long to hear, "Welcome home." That night, sitting on the porch as the waves crashed below, I realized something. Love wasn't supposed to fit neatly between ethics and ambition. It wasn't supposed to make sense or play by the rules. It was messy, terrifying, inconvenient, but real. And for the first time in years, that was enough. I looked at Ethan, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining like they were always meant to, and said softly, "You know, we're still going to argue." He smirked. "Good. I'd hate to get bored." We both laughed, the sound carried away by the sea breeze, and for once, there was no tension, no pretending, just peace. Because in the end, we didn't win our love by breaking the rules. We won it by refusing to live without it. 6 months passed before the whispers finally stopped mattering. Maybe people got tired of talking, or maybe we just stopped listening. Ethan and I built something small, quiet, and honest in that coastal town. The law office was barely more than 2 rooms and a squeaky ceiling fan, but for the first time in our lives, the work felt good, real. We helped people who couldn't afford lawyers, single mothers fighting for custody, workers wronged by their employers, kids who deserved a second chance. There were days we barely made rent, days we ate ramen by candlelight because the power bill was late. But there were also mornings when Ethan would hand me a cup of coffee, sunlight spilling across the kitchen counter, and I'd think, this is what freedom tastes like. He'd tease me about my messy desk. I'd tease him about his perfectionism. We still argued about case strategy, groceries, who left the wet towel on the bed, but now, the fights always ended with laughter or a kiss. One evening, as we walked back from the beach, shoes in hand, the sky streaked pink and gold, Ethan said something that stayed with me. "You know," he murmured, "I used to think success meant the corner office, the salary, the prestige. Now it's just this, you, the ocean, a quiet kind of peace." I looked at him, his face half lit by the sunset, and smiled. "You sound disgustingly poetic for a lawyer." He laughed. "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." That night, we sat on the porch, watching the tide roll in. The waves whispered against the rocks, soft and endless. And for the first time, I let myself imagine a future, one that wasn't temporary, one where love wasn't something to hide behind closed doors. But the world, of course, never stays silent for long. One morning, a black SUV pulled up outside the office. Out stepped a familiar figure, Richard Henderson, the senior partner who once called Ethan's resignation a tragedy for corporate law. He looked older, grayer, still intimidating in his tailored suit. "Ethan," he said coolly. "Noah." We invited him in. He didn't sit right away, just looked around the modest space, the peeling paint, the stack of legal folders on the desk. "So this is where you ended up," he said finally. Ethan didn't flinch. "This is where I started over." Mr. Henderson studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You know, the firm's been struggling with public perception since you left. People talk. They say we pushed out our best attorney because he hesitated. Different. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You mean gay? Henderson's jaw tightened. I mean, courageous enough to be honest about it. For a moment, the room went silent. Then Henderson reached into his briefcase, pulling out an envelope. This is an offer, he said, sliding it across the table. We're opening a new diversity and ethics branch. You'd run it. Full creative control. And Carter, we'd like you as senior counsel. I blinked. You're offering us both a job? Henderson nodded. You built something here that matters. The firm needs that. Needs you. Ethan looked at me, then back at him. Why now? The old man smiled faintly. Because times change. And maybe, so did I. He left the envelope on the desk and walked out, leaving the door open to the salty air and 1,000 unspoken possibilities. That night, Ethan sat by the window, the unopened envelope in his hands. Do we even want this? He asked. I thought about it. The money, the recognition, the security. All the things we once thought we needed. Then I looked around the worn-out furniture, the sound of the ocean, the framed photo of us with one of our first clients, smiling like fools. I shook my head. We already have what we wanted. He smiled softly. Yeah, I think you're right. He tore the envelope in half. And that was the moment I realized love isn't about choosing between the world and each other. It's about building a world where both can exist. The next morning, a letter arrived hand-delivered, no sender. Inside was a single note, written in Henderson's neat script. Sometimes, the bravest lawyers aren't the ones who win the biggest cases. They're the ones who live their truth. Thank you for reminding me what justice really looks like. Ethan folded the note and tucked it into the drawer. Maybe the world isn't so hopeless after all. I smiled. Maybe it's just waiting for people like us to make it better. That evening, we walked along the shoreline again, waves lapping at our feet. The air was warm, the horizon glowing with the last light of day. Ethan stopped suddenly, turning toward me. You know, I never really asked you properly. I frowned. Asked me what? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver band, simple, unadorned, but shining faintly under the fading sun. Will you keep arguing with me for the rest of our lives? He said, eyes glinting with that familiar mix of humor and hope. My breath caught. You're proposing? He shrugged, smiling. Well, technically, I'm negotiating terms of a lifelong partnership. I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. That's the most lawyer thing I've ever heard. So is that a yes? I didn't answer with words. I just leaned in and kissed him slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need witnesses or explanations. When we broke apart, I whispered against his lips. Yes, always. We married quietly 3 months later, on the same beach where we'd rebuilt our lives. Just a few friends, a handful of clients who'd become family, and the sound of the sea as our witness. When Ethan slipped the ring on my finger, he said, "Here's to every argument that brought us here." And I laughed through the tears because somehow it all made sense, the fights, the fear, the heartbreak. It all led us to this, to him. Years later, when people ask how we met, we usually say, in a courtroom. It's technically true, just not the whole story. They never need to know about the tension, the late nights, the file room that changed everything. Because what matters isn't where it started, it's where it led. 2 stubborn lawyers, once enemies, now partners in every sense of the word. Fighting not just for justice but for each other. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the only sound is the ocean outside our window, Ethan will turn to me and whisper, "You still drive me insane. You know that?" I'll grin in the dark. Good. Keeps things interesting. He'll laugh, pull me closer, and I'll fall asleep with his heartbeat steady against my back, a rhythm I once thought I'd never get to keep. Because in the end, love wasn't the verdict we waited for. It was the life we chose to live, day after day, together. And that, more than any victory, was the win that mattered most. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.